Hello everybody and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and I have another great video from Modern Horizons 3 here with Herigast Erupting Nullkite. Let's see how this commander works here. Herigast Erupting Nullkite is 9 generic legendary creature Eldrazi dragon. Very cool combination there. This guy has Emerge for 6 in a red, and I'll read you what Emerge does because it's the main focus of this deck, but you may cast this spell by sacking a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's mana value. Very interesting mana value here. That's going to be something very important when we get to the first section. But whenever you cast a spell, you may exile your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. It is flying, and each creature spell you cast has Emerge. The Emerge cost is equal to its mana value, so this gives everything Emerge. We can make discounting all of our creatures a bit better, and we have some really sneaky ways to do it. So this deck is going to revolve around copy, cheats, graveyards, sacrifice, and card value, and then finally some good stuff that's going to help us knock out this deck. But let's start by talking about that first category, with is copy, cheats, and graveyards. These are all effects that we're going to be able to use that Emerge ability to our benefit. And starting out, let's look at the copies with Calamity, Galloping Inferno, Feldon of the Third Path, and Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. Now, notably, whenever you make a token, those have no mana cost. But whenever you make a token that's a copy of a creature, those do have a mana cost. And that's where we're going to get a ton of value from here. You see, Calamity, Feldon, Kiki-Jiki, and a bunch of other cards in this deck can make copies of other creatures, and we can use those copies as they would normally just die or be sacrificed to help pay the Emerge cost of some of our other things. So, Calamity, Galloping Inferno, 4 red legendary creature horse mount with haste. When Calamity, Galloping Inferno attacks while saddled, choose a non-legendary creature that's saddled at this turn, and create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of it. Sack that token at the beginning of the next end step, repeat this process once. So Calamity here gives us 2 copies of one creature, and we have some very big stuff in this deck, so that is something to keep in mind. But next up, we have Feldon of the Third Path, 1 red legendary creature human artificer with 2 in a red. Tap, create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, and sack it at the beginning of the next end step. One of the best ways to do this is those other copy or steal effects that we have in this deck, just getting that into the bin and be able to copy it with Feldon over and over. And lastly, Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, 2 red legendary creature goblin shaman with haste, and create a token that's a copy of a non-legendary creature you control, except it hits haste, sack at the beginning of the next end step. So all of these are very good. If any of the cards we're getting back have activated abilities, we can activate them that turn. All of them can attack, and then on our second main, we can just sack them using the Emerge and get some additional benefits. And we can repeat this over and over again. So now let's look at those cheat cards, things that we can help cheat stuff into play with. We have Artisan of Kozilek, Ilharg the Razorboar, and Purphoros Bronze-Blooded. Artisan of Kozilek is 9 generic mana creature Eldrazi, with when you cast the spell, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and this has Annihilator too, so maybe we can get back some of those biggest things out of our graveyard and just immediately just deal some incredible damage. Ilharg the Razorboar is 3 red legendary creature boar god with trample, and when this attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and return that creature to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. When Ilharg the Razorboar dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library, third from the top. This similarly lets you cheat those big things in, or things that give you some value. Then you can sack them, or return them back to your hand. In Purphoros Bronze-Blooded, 4 in a red legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible. As long as your devotion is less than 5, it isn't a creature. Other creatures you control have haste. In 2 in a red, you may put a red creature card or an artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sack it at the beginning of the next end step. Very cool way to get some stuff on the board for very cheap. And the last thing is we have some graveyard shenanigans. Not as much as we would want, but there's some really cool stuff here. So we have Cauldron of the Souls, Culfer's Urn, and Flayer of the Hatebound. Cauldron of Souls, 5 generic artifact with tap. Choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gain Persist until end of turn. And Persist is an ability that says if this creature would die, you can return it with a -1/-1 counter on it. Now, it also only returns to the battlefield, again, if it doesn't have that -1/-1, so the next time it will just go to the graveyard. But Persist is a very fun mechanic that works very good in a lot of ways. Coffer's Urn is 3 generic artifact that says whenever a creature with toughness 4 or greater is put into your graveyard from play, you may remove it from the game. Then At end of turn, if 3 or more cards have been removed from the game with Kulfur's Urn, sack it. If you do, return those cards to play under their owner's control. This is just a great way to get some big creatures back for free. And Flayer of the Hatebound, 5 into red, creature devil with Undying, meaning if it dies, it enters with a +1/+1 on it. Then when Flayer of the Hatebound or another creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. A fun combo here is with Cauldron of Souls and Flayer of the Hatebound. This has Persist and Undying, when it enters, it'll simultaneously get the +1/+1 and then take it away with the Persist -1/-1, leaving it bare. So let's very quickly run through the rest of those cards that makes copy, cheat things into play, or has some graveyard shenanigans here with Delina Wild Mage, Eldrazi Obligator, Flame Shadow Conjuring, Flayer of Loyalties, Heat Shimmer, Jaxus the Troublemaker, Mimic Vat, Molten Duplication, Riona Fire Dancer, Sneak Attack, Twin Flame, and Zealous Conscripts. Now this next category is all about great things you want to sacrifice or some ways to get some additional benefits from your cards. But before we jump into those, I just want to say, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. It would really help me out. Modern Horizons 3 is coming up quick, and we're going to have a lot of great cards, so please stay subscribed to my channel, or just subscribe to make sure you get all of that news for everything that's coming out. But let's start by looking at some cards you want to sacrifice for value. Starting with Atushi, the Blazing Sky, Phyrexian Triniform, and Priest of Urabrask. Atushi, the Blazing Sky, is 4 red, legendary creature Dragon Spirit with Flying and Trample. Then, when it dies, you choose one. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards, or create 3 treasure tokens. Basically, we can discount 1 spell by 4, and then get 3 additional mana to do something else with. Phyrexian Triniform is 9 generic artifact creature Phyrexian Golem, with when it dies, create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token, so we get some really good value. This also was Encore for 12 generic mana, meaning we can cast this for 12, and then we get 3 copies that each attack an opponent. Those all get sacrificed, and then we make 9 3/3 golems at the end of that turn, which is very, very powerful. And Priest of Urabrask is 2 into red, creature human cleric that says when this enters the battlefield, add 3 red to your mana pool. So not only do we discount a spell by 3 when we sacrifice it, but we also get an additional 3 red mana to cast something else with. So we can essentially cast something at a much higher rate whenever we cast this spell. So great mana acceleration in this case. And so let's look at some other value pieces that are going to help us pop off here. So we have Imposing Grandeur, Inti, Seneschal of the Sun, and Virtue of Courage. Imposing Grandeur is 4 in a red sorcery. Each player may discard their hand and draw cards equal to the greatest mana value of a commander they own or on the battlefield or in the command zone. So this is 9 generic. So 5 mana to draw 9 cards actually seems really great to me. This is one of those decks where, hey, yeah, you have a really expensive commander, but there's a way to cheat it into play. Inti, Seneschal of the Sun, is 1 in a red legendary creature human knight that says whenever you attack, you may discard a card. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample until end of turn. Certainly that seems really good, but whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until the end of your next turn. So we also get some impulsive card draw until the end of our next turn, which is really great. I know that Inti here is kind of a staple because he's really powerful. If you watched any of the standard tournament, you won't know that. But Virtue of Courage is 3 red enchantment with Embereth Blaze, 1 in a red instant adventure. Embereth Blaze deals 2 damage to any target. Then when you cast it for Virtue of Courage, whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. A great way when we deal some additional damage to exile some cards and play them. Now let's look at the rest of those cards that are sacrifice and value pieces from this category here with Anger, Big Score, Demand Answers, Emrakul's Hatcher, Faithless Looting, Hazoret's Monument, Jessica's Will, Matter Reshaper, Solemn's Simulacrum, Thrill of Possibilities, and Tormenting Voice. So lastly here with the good stuff, we're gonna have some great ways you can kind of close out the game and some really good cards that can give you some value based on where you are in the game. So starting out, we have big damage cards. I love this category. There's some really good stuff. There's actually 6 cards here I'm going to talk about. So we're going to start out by talking about City of Fire, Combustible Gearhulk, and Invasion of Kaldheim. So City on Fire is 5 generic red enchantment with Convoke, and if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage instead. Notably here, I love convoking with our creatures that we're then going to sacrifice to cast other stuff with. So we get some great value there. Combustible Gear Hulk, 4 red artifact creature construct with first strike. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If that player doesn't, you mill 3 cards, then Combustible Gear Hulk deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. This is a great stepping stone piece that we can either leave on the board because it's a big 6/6 with first strike, or sack it in order to pay off another card. And then we have the Invasion of Kaldheim. That is a battle with Siege. When Invasion of Kaldheim enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your hand, then draw that many cards until the end of your next turn. You may play cards exiled this way. So a great way to kind of fill up our hand with some new stuff. But when we flip it over, we get Pyre of the World Tree, an enchantment that says discard a land card. This deals 2 damage to any target. And whenever you discard a land, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. What a great pair of cards here that are going to be able to deal some good damage. But some more cards we have here is Palantir of Orthoc, Skulking Vengeance, and Valkyrit, the Molten Pinnacle. Palantir here is a legendary artifact for 3 generic that says at the beginning of your end step, put an influence counter on Palantir and scry 2. Then target opponent may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, you mill X cards, where X is the number of influence counters on it, and that player loses life equal to the total mana value of those cards. Maybe after a turn or two, everybody's just going to have you draw a card because we have some really big hits in this deck that are going to deal some massive damage. Next is Skulking Vengeance. 5 red creature avatar with haste. Whenever another creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. Hey, we're going to be sacking creatures. This is going to be excellent in this deck. And then Valkyrit, the Molten Pinnacle, is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. But whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have it deal 3 damage to any target or player. So basically, after turn 5, because it's just a mono red deck, you're just dealing damage over and over and over. So what a cool card. So the second set of cards we're going to look at here for good stuff is the prototype cards. These are some Brothers War cards, and they don't work exactly how you would want them to, but they have some good benefit where you can kind of choose how you want it to go based on, how much mana you want to pay into it. I did look it up, and the 3 creatures we have here are Blitz Automaton, Fajali Dragon Engine, and Skitterbeam Battalion. So the way Prototype here works is when you cast a spell for Prototype, it is not only taking the power and toughness, but the mana value of that card. So that is something important to note, that when you cast, Blitz Automaton, you're not getting a 7 mana 3/2 if you cast it for Prototype. You're technically getting a 3 mana 3/2. So I think that these are a good stepping stone cards because some of these are cheaper and you're going to be able to get them out earlier. But then some of these are also really good, and maybe you could dump some mana in, or, they are great pieces to make copies of as well. So I thought they deserved to go in the deck. So Blitz Automaton, 7 generic artifact creature construct with haste, and it's a 6/4, but you can also cast it as a 3/2 for 2 and a red. Then Fajali Dragon Engine, 8 generic artifact creature dragon with flying, and pay 2 generic. This gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and it's a 5/5, so I think that's very good. And you can cast it as a prototype for 2 and a red for a 1/3. And then finally, Skitterbeam Battalion, 9 generic artifact creature construct with trample haste, and when this enters the battlefield, if you've cast it, create 2 tokens that are copies of it, which are going to be 2 4/4s with trample and haste. Now, when you do make a prototype of this, you are going to get 3 2/2s with trample and haste, which aren't as powerful, but surely, 3 bodies for that much mana seems really good. So if you make copies of any of these, it seems like you're going to get some good value, especially as sacrifice targets. But let's look at the rest of that good stuff category here, with Bedlam Relever, Blasphemous Act, Bolt Bend, Chaos War, Cityscape Leveler, Conduit of Ruin, Flamekin Herald, Iron Mirror, Kozilek's Return, Lava Spur Boots, Liberator Urza's Battlethopter, Morag Fury of Akum, Neheb Dreadhorde Champion, Ruby Medallion, Soul Ring, Thran Dynamo, and Void Winnower. This was a deck that surprised me. I haven't gotten a new commander that really was this interesting in a long time, if I'm being honest, and I hope that if you clicked on this video, you agree. Herigast Erupting Nullkite is really unique. We haven't seen anything like this, and if we can get some more cards like this in the Bear Commander from Modern Horizons 3, I'm going to be really looking forward to this set for Commander. On the other hand, I'm a little disappointed as far as Modern goes. I don't see this as a playable Modern card. You have to have big stuff out to get some good value, and I just don't see any strategy in Modern where that's going to actually happen. it's kind of unfortunate, that they're focusing this much attention from Modern to Commander in a Modern set, while at the same time they're pushing Commander to a place where it doesn't need to be because they are trying to push Modern. But that's where we're at, and I would just like to say thank you so much for watching. Let me know what other cards you think would be really great in this deck, because I'd be really interested to know. I found so many cool cards, and I'm sure there's a ton of other great cards and strategies that you could really just put into this deck, and it would be super fun to play. But with that, if you would please consider leaving a like, sharing this video with a friend, and subscribing, that would mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Talrand's Invocation. After Talrand conquered the depths of Chandalar, his ambition drove him skyward, joined by servants whose dive and curiosity equaled his own. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.